Hello again, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Fantasy Slant, powered by Pro Football Focus. I'm your usual host, Michael Moore, along with our usual co-hosts, Brandon, Marianne Lee, and Pat Thorman. Big episode this evening. First, we're going to get to the Debbie Downer news, Teddy Bridgewater and Bruce Ellington. We'll probably all three pour one out for him, but that'll be a little later. And then we will get to two very interesting guests. Jason Baumgartner, the director of the new DFS movie, The Perfect Lineup, along with its star, Scott Hansen, and former PFFer, by the way. We will talk to them in a little bit, but first, let's just get to it and get it out of the way. By now, everyone's heard Teddy Bridgewater completely destroyed his knee. We won't get into the details. You can Google them yourself, but apparently it was pretty bad and was close to amputation if you needed any idea of how bad it was. So, I don't know. I guess the first question is, you've got Shaun Hill, Pat. He's the starter until we hear otherwise. You know, I guess the more important question is, what does this do to the people around him, not so much at that position?
Well, I mean, it hurts, but it probably doesn't hurt as much as a typical offense would, because I mean, it's still going to be, run heavy. It's still going to be slow pace. It's still going to be low risk. They're still going to try to win with their defense. But I think what it does, it probably doesn't move our baseline projections too much for these guys. It probably kind of robs us, or at least severely diminishes the upside, our ability to be surprised by something positively. I mean, by all reports, Teddy had a great camp, a great offseason. He was looking good. Diggs was going to take the next step. Charles Johnson was healthy, and he might have surprised us a little bit. McKinnon, I mean, we always know he's got plenty of upside, and they might have hit their stride a little bit a year earlier than we expected them to, at least in the passing game. But now I think you're looking at with Hill, who's 36 years old. He's like the fifth oldest quarterback in the league. You're probably looking at like last year. I would probably say, without much room for positive surprises. So it's depressing. It's depressing in a real football sense because it's an exciting young team, and it kind of robs them of a lot of their hope. It doesn't really move the needle that much on a fantasy level, but I think like I said, it robs us of the ability to be surprised to the upside.
So, Brandon, should we get ready for 500 carries from Adrian Peterson this year?
Minimum. I do think that. I think that if I were Mike Zimmer, I would be in the back office saying, when does Mark Sanchez arrive?
So
no, I think this
not
team...
Not Geno Smith, not Colin Kaepernick even. Mark Sanchez is your guy.
I think Mark Sanchez has the closest skill set to Teddy Bridgewater, oddly enough, including like where he lines up in formations. I would say that Mark Sanchez would give them a much better chance than Shaun Hill. And again, to repeat what Pat said, the Minnesota Vikings are a very exciting team, not only on the offensive side of the ball, which I know this is a fantasy show, but on the defensive side of the ball, they're bordering on elite, depending on how they can all come together as a unit. This obviously robs them of the energy that they had going into the season, and it clearly was very distressing, and they canceled practice immediately after 25 minutes in because it was so gruesome. And that'll take some time to rebound from, but I don't think they can do it with Shaun Hill. I think they can do it with someone out on the market. Now, I guess maybe Colin Kaepernick. I guess maybe Geno Smith. But to me, Mark Sanchez is kind of that gentle spirit that could maybe help, because that's what Teddy Bridgewater was too. And I was there when Teddy Bridgewater was drafted. And I remember when the Vikings moved into the last pick of that first round, I remember screaming. I was like, that is the best pick of the draft. A steal. I could not believe that there he was just sitting there. And the Vikings were like, I can't handle this. We have to move up. This is crazy. We have to do it. And I was so glad they did.
Remember who was picking the first, had the first pick of the second round, right?
The Texans.
The Texans, right.
Oh, and you know that they thought this was a done deal. Yeah. They were at the end of the night drinking champagne like, hey, we got both. They thought they were just lucky hunky-dory. No. So, I was incredibly impressed. So as far as I'm concerned, I would like to see that. I know it's only 10 days away from kickoff, but I think this is the time that they need to do it. And as far as I'm concerned, I'm totally with Pat. I think this is a really exciting team. I hope they can keep that momentum. I do think, again, who benefits? the number one receiver, which I think is still Stephon Diggs. So whenever a backup comes in, they always rely on Old Faithful. And believe it or not, their Old Faithful though is only a second-year guy, so that's a little distressing. But I still believe in Stephon Diggs. I don't believe in Kyle Rudolph. Never really have.
That's okay. We're not. That's not a surprise. I don't think anyone will hold that against you.
No, but sometimes they rely on their tight ends too. We've discussed that. But Kyle Rudolph has just proven to be disappointing every season, and I don't see a big resurgence here, unless you guys do.
Oh, well, one note on Shaun Hill, and last time we saw him play, significant snaps was the last 7 weeks of 2014 with the Rams, and during those 7 weeks, Jared Cook was the 10th most targeted tight end, and Benny Cunningham. I'm not advocating Kyle Rudolph. You heard it here first.
It's on record.
Hot take.
Kyle Rudolph. Truther.
No. But also Benny Cunningham was the 9th most targeted running back, so that might be a little bit of don't sweat too much for Jerick McKinnon, who's somebody that we kind of like in that third down role with the ability to maybe become a RB1 if something happened to Peterson.
And I'm probably going to be the only one on the planet that is not, I guess, completely grossed out by Shaun Hill, but like his career stats are not bad. I mean, I'm not saying he's going to lead them to the playoffs, but he's got a 62% completion percentage, 6.8 yards per attempt, and 49 touchdowns to 30 interceptions. So, it's not like yes, he's replacement level, to borrow a baseball term, but I don't know. I think they'll be okay. Now, the big question is, he is 36. I think I saw he's either the 4th or the 5th oldest starting quarterback as of week 1. And the bigger concern is he going to last the whole 16 games? Because he's very immobile, I guess is the correct term. He does not move around a lot. And if that line doesn't protect him, he's going to get some hits. And if he can't wait those out, then who knows? I mean, people are throwing their hands up at that point. So
and it's funny because even in San Francisco and then for his time in Detroit, one of his kind of sneaky attributes, was he was mobile at that time. But I mean, we're going back 10 years now, so I don't think any of us who are no longer in our 20s are nearly as mobile as we once were.
No. And let's face it. Look at all the 36 and older quarterbacks. They're not the mobile ones. Drew Brees and Tom Brady are not exactly mobile. So anyway, but it's unfortunate. Hopefully Teddy comes back for next season. I mean, there's some doubt on if that will happen. So,
however, even if he skips 2, he'll still only be 25.
Sure.
He's one of the youngest quarterbacks to ever play, so there is hope. I was really upset by this. I know that sounds weird, but I for whatever reason, this really struck me, the Teddy Bridgewater one. It just really kind of rocked me. I wasn't very active on social media. I just kind of checked out. I was like, this just doesn't feel right. So I'm sure a lot of other people felt that way.
More, Brandon, Teddy Bridgewater or Bruce Ellington?
Bridgewater.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll get to Bruce Ellington.
But yes, Ellington has always been the guy you take last in your draft. I kept repeating that, right? I was like, I'm telling you, don't take him early, last pick of your draft. And I'm okay being wrong. By the way, you're not even wrong if someone goes on IR before week 1.
No, right.
It just is what it is. Like, so actually, I feel fine about it.
Right.
I feel great. I didn't actually get wrong.
Correct. Technically, you did not. We're good. So, all right, well, let's get to a player trying to come back from IR. That would be Mr. Jamaal Charles. A little bit of a surprise came out of Chiefs camp today. He has not fully regained the starting job there in Kansas City. It's still Spencer Ware seeing most of the first team snaps and carries. So, Pat, I mean, how much stock are you putting into that? Are you shying away from Jamaal Charles? Are you buying up Spencer Ware stock at this point?
Well, I think you can kind of be positive about both of them. I don't think I'm too freaked out about the Jamaal Charles stuff. I mean, he's a guy who is, he's 30. He's coming back from his second ACL. They had said from the start that they're going to take it easy on him. So, and they obviously have, at least one, depending on what you think of West, 2 viable backups to take those reps in camp and to probably take more of the load early in the season than they were before Charles was injured in the first place. So I think that it makes for a sexier headline than it actually is a surprise. As far as how the Chiefs are handling things. Charles says he's full go. He's 100% or close to it. And it's just a matter of where taking the reps, West taking the reps, and saving some wear and tear on Charles. I mean, he's going at the back of the second round. He's going to running back 7. I have him as running back 9, so that's kind of based. I'm not going to move him based on this news. He's never been a guy who's been a major workload type running back. Anyway, he's thrived on efficiency. The last time he came back from his ACL in 2012, he started relatively slowly. I mean, for him, he was the running back 14 over the first 8 games. With a 4.8 yards per carry average, but then over the final 8 games, he was running back 5 with a 5.7 yards per carry average, and he did it with only 3 touchdowns on both ends of those equations. So he's a guy who can still produce in fantasy even if he's not scoring, and that's kind of what the worries is now, because you're saying Ware's going to get the goal line carries, which may well be true, but I don't think Charles is entirely dependent on getting goal line carries to deliver on his ADP anyway.
Yeah, but I don't like how you said, Pat, the last time he returned from an ACL injury, because that means he's had 2 now, which are, no joke. No. Brandon, what about you? Where did you have Charles before, and does this news do anything to that?
Yeah, I have him high. I feel okay with it. Again, I mean, the guy has never averaged less than 5 yards per carry, and last year he was averaging 35 receiving yards and 4 catches per game. That's his average. Again, I didn't say his max. So yeah, it's his efficiency. I feel like the Chiefs are a lot like the Vikings in this area, where they're actually a very exciting team, both on the offense and defensive side of the ball. So I think that they're trying to look at the long game here. I think they feel like they're going to go to the playoffs. I think they feel like they want everyone to be healthy throughout the year. It does not surprise me at all. They were very clear that they weren't going to rush Jamaal Charles back in like March, before the draft. They were talking about that, so they were happy that they had Spencer Ware and Charkandrick West there to take some of the load away. So to me, they're just kind of following through, which is a little scary as a fantasy owner. But at the same time, I kind of feel like it's like when you draft any of these big time players that could get hurt. Arian Foster is the same way, but you can get Foster a lot later, right? But that when he's playing, you feel good about playing him. So I still feel like that about Jamaal Charles. I don't think he'll be out there as a decoy. I don't think it's going to be like that. But I do think that they're going to keep it light at the beginning. And again, they think they're going to the playoffs, and I don't think they're wrong.
Yeah. Hey, look, they have been able to do it the last couple of years, with and without Charles. So I don't see why that should change anything. And look, getting a little on a tangent, that division, I would argue, is not as strong as it was last year without Peyton Manning in Denver. I mean, with that whole quarterback situation, it's a very winnable division. So it's not like, hey, it's a slam dunk that the Chiefs can't do well there, So, all right, let's get to also something that wasn't on our previous agenda, so it will be a surprise. So get ready. It did come out that Thomas Rawls, Seattle running back, was going to be good to go for Week 1, so sort of confirming what we had all hoped and prayed for all preseason. So, Pat, Kristen Michaels had a really good offseason, really good preseason. So, where are you taking Rawls? What does this dynamic look like to you now?
Well, Rawls is a tough one to pin down, to be perfectly honest. And, I mean, if Michael hadn't emerged, it obviously would have been a little bit easier. And you also throw in Procise, who's technically supposed to get the passing down work. So it's almost splits it up 3 ways. And the fact is we haven't seen Rawls, and we really can't know for sure how good he looks. I mean, Pete Carroll says he looks great, but Pete Carroll says Jimmy Graham looks great. Pete Carroll can talk a dog off a meat wagon. I'm not really sure I really trust exactly.
He's a very positive guy.
Yeah. So I mean, it's kind of one of those situations where you still got to spend pretty high draft capital. So it's kind of dicey. I mean, there seems to be guys going around him that I've kind of gravitated toward over the 70-something NFL 10s that I've done throughout the offseason. I don't have very many Rawls shares. So it kind of sounds like a cop-out or whatever, but I don't have a real great feel for Rawls and what to expect.
Brandon, what about you? Where are you, I guess, comfortable taking Rawls at this point, whether it's redraft or MFL leagues or anything like that?
Yeah, 5th.
Okay. Which I think is probably lower than he's actually going, just based on name and reputation from last year, right?
Yeah, his ADP was in the third, but it's gone down to the fourth or fifth, depending on who you're drafting with. So to me, he's someone that I'm waiting on running back, and I feel fine having him as a starter in that case. Um, but not, like kind of where you're waiting, but really you're kind of also going for balance with upside. Let's be honest. So
Right.
that's kind of where he is for me. I feel fine about him, but I actually think Christian Michael beat out CJ Procise more than he beat out Thomas Rawls, in my opinion.
Well, and that brings up a sort of related question. I mean, I guess, how high does Christian Michael rank as a handcuff for you two compared to other handcuffs? Like, look, there's handcuffs all over the league. Obviously, better situations than others. So, Brandon, and Christian Michael did very well. I mean, he played his way back into this conversation.
Mm-hmm.
So, is he your top handcuff? Is he a top 5 handcuff? Where does he fall among handcuffs for you?
I mean, the gold standard is going to be D'Angelo Williams still, but you have to go in the 5th round for D'Angelo Williams
Right.
now. It's crazy because those Le'Veon Bell owners are like, you know what? I'm just going to use 2 picks in the first 6th round for 1 slot on my whole team. And you know what? You do
But
you.
it's a very good slot. Let's not forget.
That's right, but 2 of the 6, yowza.
Yeah.
Fine, but I think that he's not necessarily a handcuff. I think he's competition, and I think that's why people are freaked out. And I actually think, again, I think that CJ Procise's injury took him out of the running to really be the pass catching back. If you actually watch the preseason game, he didn't do any pass catching. He was running. I think they wanted to test him. They were like, listen, we did not establish that role in the offseason because you weren't here. So either you're able to sustain and be a backup and do what we need you to do, or we can't use you. I mean, literally, like, he has to fit into their system, not the other way around. And I don't know why people thought that was going to happen anyway, but certainly once he was injured, to me, that was game over. But Christian Michael has really earned some time, I think. So I think he's more of a guy that you take for upside, thinking that if something happens to Rawls, or even he just beats him. I mean, we don't know really what Rawls looks like you said. Now, Rawls did average 5.6 yards per carry last year. He was oddly quite good, not involved in the passing game at all. So if they do want balance in their running back, if they want one guy who can do everything, I think that's actually Christian Michael.
Could be, yeah. And we all agree Rawls was very efficient last year. It was just kind of up and down, meaning there'd be stretches where he didn't play or didn't see a lot of attention. Then he'd go on a streak, and then he got hurt, obviously, towards the end of the year. That kind of derailed that. So, and I sort of touched on this with my own article. It was about Thomas Rawls in a dynasty perspective. But, and you and I, Brandon, talked about this a couple episodes ago. I think they're just building more around Russell Wilson lately and not relying as much on the running game. I mean, look, he's exponentially gone up as far as pass attempts go every year in his career. And by the way, I did not know this. Did you know, the two of you, Russell Wilson has the 4th highest yards per attempt in NFL history currently. And
I did not know in history.
And 8th highest, again, in history, completion percentage of all time.
No, Russell Wilson is amazing. I don't want to be like one of those like groupies, but if I was one,
I will groupie with you, and I'm a 49ers fan. You can't deny it. I mean, the guy is just super efficient, and look, it makes sense for them to go, you know what? Like, we're just going to turn it over to you, man. Like, you just lead him to the promised land. And look, that's not to say the running game for Seattle's still not going to be good. It's going to be very good, but it's just they don't have a bell cow now. And look, it makes sense that they kind of mix and match and trade guys out and all that kind of stuff. So.
But their offensive line is still a problem.
Yep. Yeah, I guess. You gotta
for the run game, not Russell Wilson, but for the run game. So that's the other issue, in my opinion.
And Russell Wilson helps the run game. His mobility
definitely
opens lanes. I mean, Marshawn Lynch wasn't Marshawn Lynch until he started playing with Russell Wilson. Just real quick on Rawls, he's going at the 11th pick in the 3rd round, according to a fantasy football calculator, which it seems a little bit steep. And even Christian Michael's going earlier than I expected. He's going in the middle of the 8th round. Yeah, he's going right around Isaiah Crowell, T.J. Yeldon. He's going a round before Charles Sims, a round or so. I would probably take Charles Sims over Christian Michael, but I'm a little bit higher on Sims maybe than most.
Yeah, I don't know that I would. I might take Michael over. Or I mean, I think it depends on the league. That has something to do with it. If we're talking PPR, okay, but standard leagues, I think I might go Michael on that, just because, like Brandon said, I think he's got a good shot to be the lead guy there at some point. You know.
Yeah, that's true.
So,
one thing on pro size, I mean, I agree with what you guys are saying, but I think we will probably see him come on as the season progresses. I know he's often compared to David Johnson, which I think it might be a little bit aggressive. There are similarities, but
a little.
Yeah, he is
Just a tad.
He's like the archetype, and he's been compared to you know, his traits and stuff. But I think we'll see Pro Size be a lot more involved in November, December than he's going to be in the first 2 months.
Sure. Well, and look, we know Pete Carroll, as for all his positivity, he knows what he's doing. I think he'll exploit the most advantageous thing he's got, and like you said, Pat, that probably will be Pro Size out of the backfield towards the end of the season. So, all right, well, let's end this Debbie Downer episode, Brandon, for you especially. This will be officially the last time we mention Bruce Ellington on this podcast for the season, as we mourn his injured hamstring. But more so, Brandon, let's just talk about how bad the 49ers offense is going to be in general. Go.
I mean, I don't want to say that Bruce Ellington was their only hope. That seems dramatic.
It might have been.
But I think they need a slot guy. Now, supposedly now it's going to be Jeremy Curley.
They need a lot.
Yowza.
Yeah.
Again, you know, we kind of beat this horse on the last podcast, too, when we talked about how they're starting wide receivers got a total of 5 targets in the third preseason game. No, that was the whole preseason.
Yeah,
the whole preseason, only 5 targets for their starting wide receivers. So I have no idea what's going on. I do know that Bruce Ellington's now on IR. I personally have made moves based off of that information. You probably need to as well. It did bring me, though, to this. And I know you're the host and you ask the questions, but when did it become so cool to draft in June? Like, I love drafting Labor Day weekend, and I like knowing what's going on. And then I said something like, this is why we always say to draft at the last possible minute. I said this on the Her Fantasy Football Twitter page, and then these people were like, yeah, I can't believe people make fun of people that draft then. I was like, do people do that? Do people make fun of people drafting when they're informed? What is that about?
Maybe. I don't. Like, I don't do that.
But this is why, right?
I think it's probably to scratch an itch that people have had for the last 6 months.
Maybe.
You know?
Okay.
I mean, they're very eager. I mean, they're very anxious to sort of get on with it. You know. So now, but I'm with you. If you want to be the most squared away as far as players go, yes, you wait as long as possible. I think that's a given. But, you know, you sort of have to rip the Band-Aid off at some point. So you either bite the bullet and go, hey, let's get this over with early, or you just go, hey, see you on Labor Day and see what happens. So.
But my leagues that I've already drafted, I can't pick up anyone. It's all like the waivers are frozen.
Then what
is the point?
You need to talk to your commissioner then, Brandon. I don't know what to tell you.
I know. Well, I think we're probably in some of them together.
You need to do Robert's rules of order on that and have a vote and make it official. That's what you need
I just thought that I was like, what is the point? One of them, there's not even waivers until after the first full weekend.
Scott Fishbowl is like that.
Huh?
Scott Fishbowl is like that, and that drafts around July 4th.
Oh, yeah, it is. Yeah, I know, and I probably already have 3 players on that team that have been injured for the season.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
And
all of the 49ers should be considered injured. Am I right?
Injured, suspended, blackballed, whatever term you want to call it.
Yeah.
They're not going to be playing. So, and that's as far as we'll go with that. But yeah, I think the bottom line is, you know, well, and Pat, let me ask you this. We've heard a lot about Vance McDonald this offseason and preseason. He hasn't really separated himself. Are we sure he's the guy for tight end there?
It's tough to tell because the jokers that are throwing on the ball.
Right.
He had that one touchdown. I believe it was the first preseason game against Houston. But other than that, we haven't, like you said, haven't really seen much from him. I mean, he's not really that expensive. He's like the tight end 22 or 24 or something like that. So it's not like you're really breaking the bank to get him. I think maybe the Ellington injury gives him a little bit of a boost. A couple more inside type targets are freed up at this point. Maybe you can look at Quentin Patton, but I mean, the problem is it's like you just have no faith in the guy distributing the ball.
You do not.
It's tough. I mean, volume is great, and I mean, I write about I write that pace article. I love no huddle. It's awesome. But I mean, if you're just going to hurry up and punt, what's the use? So it's like. It's depressing because I mean we liked Ellington, we liked Hyde, we liked Torrey Smith, we even kind of had some hope for Kaepernick, and like most of that is just blown out of the water at this point. I mean Torrey Smith, I mean who doesn't have a ton of Torrey Smith at this point? I mean you got to be nervous about it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a rough situation, and yeah, I mean they got an awful schedule. They got a worse quarterback, so they're going to be in bad game scripts, and that's just not going to help out anybody. So yeah, it's I don't know. The Rats are jumping off the boat now for good reason, I think.
I'm glad you brought up Hyde. I think he's on my no-go list.
Yeah.
I would agree. Yeah, I mean, look, you have to be on a decent team if you're a running back, right? Like if it's gonna work, if it's gonna be conducive to his fantasy relevance,
yeah.
And they're gonna be behind a lot, and they're going to be throwing it a lot. And who knows about the offensive line? There's just a lot of questions.
He's never rushed for over 500 yards.
Well, that's because he's been hurt the entire time.
Right. So, I mean, like, we don't know anything about him, and he's on a terrible offense. I mean, it's just there are too many things happening for Carlos Hyde to be on my fantasy team, and he's still going in, the third round?
Yeah. Well, because, I mean,
What?
honestly, that's a guy that his ADP, I would bet, has not changed a whole lot from those June drafts to now because nobody thought about it. Because, honestly, who's paying attention to San Francisco? Nobody. But now it's like, oh, crap, like there's really nobody there and there's no help for him.
It's going 404 according to Fantasy Football Calculator.
Yeah. And even that might be too high.
Yeah.
I think I might.
Oh, it absolutely is. Because I also think they're going to share with Sean Drone.
I hope so. I have a lot of Sean Drone shares out there.
Drone, that's right.
I hope they do.
The problem is you're not going to be able to confidently start him.
Absolutely.
And in a weekly league, we're not talking about best ball. We're not talking about MFL 10s. I mean, I've got Carlos Hyde shares in MFL 10s. He's probably going to have a blow-up game or two. That's great. But is he going to be in your starting lineup when he has it? I mean, you look at the run of opponents they have at the beginning of the year, and you're not going to feel comfortable starting him against any of them. And by the time they have a couple soft spots, are you really going to want to start Carlos Hyde? So that's a huge problem to sink a high draft choice into. Excuse me.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Do we want to set an over/under on which week Jeff Driscoll finally starts for them, or is it too soon for that? I would say like week 6.
Yeah,
probably,
week 6.
or halfway through, whatever their bye week is, probably right after.
I might take the under because, like I said, the beginning of that. So assuming Kaepernick is shipped to Russia or wherever they want.
Siberia.
To ship him. Yeah. It's like the beginning of that schedule is brutal, and Gabbert, how he gets when there's a pass rush around him, he might just have a nervous breakdown. So
he gets like you and I would.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I can't blame him, but I'm not a pro quarterback.
I wouldn't be surprised if Christian Ponder starts at some point.
That's a good possibility too. Believe me, all cards are on the table with that team. Who knows? Anyway, all right, that will do it for this portion of the Fantasy Slants, and Brandon, Marianne Lee, and Pat Thorman. When we come back, we will talk to the director and star of the Perfect Lineup movie, Jason Baumgartner and Scott Hansen.